Whatever's available. Here, I would just do it at 9:40. 9:39. Okay, that's fine. Oh, we got a lot of people. I don't know. I'm sure.
I'm not a person who cares too much. Like, I'm definitely not the target demographic for social media stuff. Definitionally.
What is their social media? Alright.
I understand.
Alright, let's do it. Welcome back to the Butterfly House and Aquarium. My name is Matt. This is Colton. He's one of our biologists here. I'm an educator. What makes you say that? And today we are in the containment room here at the Butterfly House and Aquarium, doing a little bit of a behind the scenes look so that you can get a better idea of what happens here. Where you can see. So, Colton, can you start off by telling us where we are and what this room is for?
So this is our containment room. It's a USDA contained room, United States Department of Agriculture. So the purpose of this room is anytime we get an introduced butterfly or a chrysalis or any of our animals that go into our conservatory, they come in here first to be processed. We're looking for any potential dangers to the environment to either release into our conservatory or anything that could be so dangerous we can't have it here in South Dakota. That's the first thing we're looking for. And the other thing is nothing that enters this room or our butterflies or the conservatory is allowed to leave this facility at all. They could potentially be damaging native agriculture or related species.
One of the biologists here. My partner Janae and I are both of the biologists. We take care of all of the butterflies, all of the plants, the conservatory, and we deal with our animal ambassadors. So we are the people who do all of the husbandry, we deal with the care of the animals, feeding, cleaning, and then in terms of the butterflies, our biggest thing is we deal with the emergence window back here, which we will see in a little bit, where we contain all of our chrysalis and we go through the process of raising the butterflies essentially.
Awesome, awesome. So how did you get into this career field?
So I got a degree in biology at the University of Minnesota in Twin Cities. When I was up there during the summers, I worked for the Minnesota Zoo. It was a fun summertime job. I fell in love with working with insects and butterflies and teaching people about it. And then once I graduated, I was pretty determined to get into the industry, and then I ended up here. So that's my story. But a lot of people do that same thing, right? They find either an internship or they volunteer at a zoo, and then that turns into the passion, and then they eventually find the job. So
Makes sense. That's very similar to my story, so I relate to it. So what's your favorite part of your job?
My favorite part of my job is basically anytime I can turn an animal people would like instinctively not like, so millipedes, cockroaches, or a tarantula, if I can turn that into something somebody's super interested in, when they can see an animal that they would normally instinctively go away from or flinch, if they can turn that interest towards the animal into something they could in the future want to learn about, then I feel like I've succeeded at my goal.
Makes sense to me. So, you mentioned the emergence window earlier.
Yes.
So, I want you to tell me, what is the point of the emergence window?
So, the emergence window is where we have all of our chrysalis before the caterpillar turns into the butterfly. They turn into a chrysalis. The emergence window contains all of our chrysalis. So chrysalis need very specific humidities, temperatures, levels of sunlight, all of that, to actually go through that process in a healthy manner. So we have the emergence window in here mostly to replicate that environment out in nature. It's not that they need like plants or anything. You're not going to see anything in there that's like that. They need very specific temperatures, humidity, and sunlight. And that's what the window represents. Does those things for the caterpillars and chrysalis.
Well, it sounds really cool. Do you want to open it up and start to take a look?
So, if you come over here, You can see we have a large variety of Chrysalis down here, and then we have some cocoons up here. These are several different species, all represented inside of our conservatory. These species are here in the window on this level of it, because they need one level of humidity. And if you look down here, we have these things called humidity boxes. These are for species that need a higher level of humidity. So all of our butterflies are tropical species, but some of those tropical species need regular humidities well in excess of like 70 plus humidity to actually go through their process properly. They go in the humidity box. Ones in the window tend to need somewhere actually around 60 to 70%. And if they get too high in the humidity, it can actually turn into something bad for them. Hence the separations.
Oh, very interesting. So, as you mentioned, we have a ton of chrysalises in here.
Mm-hmm.
Where do we get them? How do we get them? Do we raise the caterpillars ourselves, or?
So we do not raise any of our caterpillars here. That requires a lot of plant material. Caterpillars are vicious eaters. But if you actually look over here on this map, all of those little dots are where our butterflies are raised by a series of butterfly farms. As you can see, they range from South America to Africa to Indonesia, Australia. They go all over the world in the tropical regions. And then we have a series of suppliers. So these people collect the butterfly chrysalis from the farmers, and then they ship them to us essentially in the US mail or FedEx. They get shipped over the seas, come to us, we unpack them, and we put them into the window to help with their emergence.
Awesome. So when you get a shipment, I assume they just come as just a chrysalis, right?
Yeah, so they come in a variety of different packaging, but essentially the goal is you take this little chrysalis here, you wrap it up in either like foam or tissue paper, you pack it all up together, you label them nice and tight, and then you seal them several times. So every single one of our chrysalis has to be in a package that's, I think, 3 or 4 times sealed. There has to be several layers between it and the outside environment, and then they come to us.
And so how do you get them on here? How are they hanging here?
So what's going on here is, so in the wild, a chrysalis will normally either hang itself up by a silk cremaster, so it'll connect itself to a cremaster with some silk, or it'll make itself a little silk hammock. That's more so the idea of what like cocoons and stuff do. So what we do is we take the butterfly, we take the chrysalis, and if you'll see here, several of them have this little section at the top called a cremaster. What we're able to do is actually use a tiny bit of foam, you can see here, and we can, with a cold hot glue gun, we can attach that piece of foam, and then we can pin through that foam, and then we can set them up so that they're able to replicate that hanging they would do in nature. The other method we do is if they have enough silk naturally, or they have a cocoon, like our atlas moths do, we can pin directly through that cocoon or that silk, and we can hang them that way. So we don't have to do the hot glue.
So you just said cocoon, and obviously we've been talking about chrysalises this whole time.
Yes.
What is the difference between a cocoon and a chrysalis?
So essentially, a cocoon is just an extra layer around a normal chrysalis. So all of the butterflies and moths, they make these little nice chrysalis, and then some moths will essentially take like a leaf, they'll wrap it around themselves like a blanket, they'll silk it all shut, and then they'll make their cocoon, they'll make their chrysalis inside of the cocoon. So the cocoon is literally just that like fancy nice leaf silk blanket they make for themselves.
So it's just an extra layer.
Yeah, it's just an extra layer. Often the reason they're doing that is their strategy is actually to hide amongst leaf litter. So chrysalis are meant to try and hide amongst the branches and leaves and get lost inside of that complexity of like a bush or a tree. Cocoons, it's generally the cocoon is on the ground, they get it wrapped up, and then it looks like leaf litter and things won't want to eat it.
Oh, makes a lot of sense to me. So I see a lot of chrysalis here. How many can we fit in the E-window?
So inside of our E-window, if all of the chrysalis are appropriately spaced and given some time, the variety in chrysalis size does make this number a little rough, but it can be in excess of 1,000. So we can have over 1,000 chrysalis inside of our E-window, and that translates into our conservatory normally having somewhere between 800 to 2,100 butterflies in it at any given time.
Holy moly, that's a lot. So you know, we have 1,000 chrysalis in here at a time, potentially.
Mm-hmm.
How long will butterflies stay in their chrysalis or cocoon for?
So normally butterflies will stay inside of their chrysalis for around 10 to 14 days. So around a week and a half to 2 weeks. But you can actually get some crazy ones, like the Atlas moth up here. These guys can sit in it for the entirety of what would be their dry season. So they'll go into it and they'll stay inside of their cocoon for upwards of almost a year. So
that's a long time to sit in a cocoon. I couldn't sit there for that long. So the butterfly comes out of the chrysalis, it emerges. Then what happens?
So it emerges. The first thing it does is it emerges, and it breaks open the very bottom of its cocoon. There's these things called the Emergence Triangles. It's a little difficult to see, but there's like a zipper that's running along here like a seam. Those butterflies will pop that open, they'll pull themselves up, and the first goal they have is to pump up their wings. So their wings come in these little crumpled messes, and then they start to push a material called meconium through it. It's a mixture of feces and blood, and they pump that through the wings, get them nice and pumped out, and then they solidify through their contact with the air. And then once that's together, they'll put together their mouth. So they have what's called a proboscis. It's like a big straw. That straw is actually in 2 parts, and they re-put it all together, kind of like a zipper going up. So the 2 parts will connect all together, they'll flex it out, and once they have their mouth together and they have their wings all pumped up and hardened, then the butterfly is able to fly away. Here at the butterfly house, our E-window is not directly connected to our conservatory. We have to physically move them into the conservatory.
Okay. So basically when they're ready to fly, they're in there, they're flying around, you reach in, grab them, and move them to the conservatory.
Yes, that's the goal. So when we do that, we actually use these wonderful little tools. They're essentially like a big pop-up net structure. So I'll show you. So normally, when you think about it, butterflies want to fly up. So you want to put it so that you can easily put your hand in and they can go up right away. And then when we're moving our butterflies, we have to be incredibly careful. Their wings are very delicate and they're covered in these tiny little scales. The scales come off on the oils of your fingertips. So we do a thing where we pinch them between the sides of our fingers. And we'll take the butterfly and we'll pinch it. Obviously, this can take a second. So we'll pinch it like this so that we have the butterfly trapped and I'm not rubbing off too many scales. And then I can put it directly into here. Normally, we want to try and give them that purchase on the top. If they're already flying around, we put them in and we can just let them go. But when they're like this guy, he's not quite fully prepared to fly, but he will, in a little bit, be ready. So that's why I'm moving him. And then down here, we have this cool stuff. So this is our E window. And as you can see down here, they hang themselves out to dry like that.
So a question just popped into my mind.
Yes.
How does a caterpillar know when it's time to turn into a chrysalis, to become a butterfly?
So, almost all caterpillars will hatch from an egg, probably about no difference in size than the head of this pen. So what it will do is it will make that little egg, it'll hatch, it'll eat its egg, and then it just starts eating. And unlike you and I, they can't grow constantly. They have an exoskeleton. So once the inside of their body starts to get a little too tight, they have too much in there, the exoskeleton is too small, they'll molt, they'll get rid of that top layer of exoskeleton, they'll pull out, they'll make a new one around their bigger body. So they do that several times. This is called the process of making a new instar. They'll go through somewhere between 4 to 6 instars, depending on the caterpillar. And then once they get to that final instar and they can feel themselves getting in that same process, instead of molting again, instead they'll climb up, they'll hang in a J, and they'll form their chrysalis. The chrysalis is just that another layer of that exoskeleton. So what they do is they turn that final layer of exoskeleton into the chrysalis, And then they essentially turn into like a butterfly caterpillar soup inside the chrysalis while they change from the caterpillar to the butterfly.
Oh, very interesting.
Yeah.
So one last question before we move some of these freshly emerged butterflies into the conservatory. How many species of butterfly could we have at any given time?
So at any given time, the range is somewhere between 40 to 80. So this is really dependent on the time of year. Certain butterflies at our farms only are going to actually be going through the process of turning into chrysalis at a certain time of the year. They're generations, so some will make one generation, so the caterpillar will survive 9 months, the adult for a couple weeks, and then the chrysalis for another couple weeks. Others will have multiple generations, like the monarch. It'll have like 5 or 6 generations in a year. So it's really dependent on the species and what time of year it is. If you're getting into like the height of summer or the dead of winter is actually when we have some of the greatest varieties in summer.
Interesting. So right now we might have a higher amount potentially in the summer?
So right now, here in the late December or in like June, you're going to get the highest density in terms of different butterflies. Just because when you think about it, in the south, and the northern parts of the tropics, that's when their seasons are changing. So it's when their like summer equivalent or their summer equivalent will happen, depending on what it is.
Makes sense. Well, do you want to move these guys into the conservatory?
Yeah, let's show you this. We'll go through here. So in here in our conservatory, we do not actually want to like go in and grab the butterflies and throw them out or set them out. Instead, we'll bring them around here, and we'll go through this gazebo over here, and the goal is we'll hang this up, and we'll let the butterflies emerge naturally. We don't want to interfere too much with our butterflies. We want them to perform as many natural behaviors as possible. And they should be able to smell, get an idea that there's plenty of flowers, other things like Gatorade or nectar for them to drink. So we'll hang them up over here, and then we hang them up our gazebo, and then once they're free, they'll fly out whenever they want to.
Very interesting. So, first, thank you so much for showing us the window, showing us containment, showing us how the butterflies go from being a caterpillar in a different country to being a butterfly in our conservatory. Before we go, is there anything else you think people should know or might want to know about our conservatory, about butterflies, anything like that?
So the thing I always love to tell people about the butterflies that I think is just a cool fun fact is essentially butterflies eat almost anything that they can. They only have this little straw-like mouth, the proboscis, as I was saying. And in our conservatory, we replicate a lot of the natural ways they would get it. We have fruit baskets, we have big piles of what's Gatorade. It's essentially acting as a sugar thing. And then we also have our wonderful flowers that are blooming at different times in the year for our butterflies to get nectar. But they will also do cool things like they'll land on our path to get salt off of our feet. That's one of their big sources of food. They'll also like to land in like disgusting muddy puddles because the disgusting muddy puddles have tons of salts and nutrients for them to drink. So that's the fun thing. I always like to tell people about the cool things they eat.
Awesome. Well, like I said, thank you so much for taking us through the whole process. And thank everybody who decided to watch and everybody who watches in the future after this isn't live. I would really appreciate it. And hopefully you'll tune in next time when we discover something else behind the scenes here at the Butterfly House and Aquarium. My name is Mack, this is Colton. Thank you so much. Bye.